Working towards this for the last 13 years. At 5:15 on November the 9th, they got it.
2, 1, 0.
Fusion, creating energy by smashing atoms together, and the life's work for most of the 450 scientists from all over Europe working on the JET project at Culham.
It's taken 35 years to get a smile like this. Yes.
Oh, tremendous. I've been here 18 years and this is what we've been waiting for.
Imagine a world where there was limitless and inexhaustible energy. Energy that didn't come from harming the environment like the ones we have today. Energy that isn't wasteful. Heck, energy that could serve humanity for decades to come. Well, that doesn't seem far-fetched when dealing with nuclear fusion. So you may be wondering, could everything I just said be true, and if it is, then what's the catch? Well, I'll come back to that in a second, but first of all, let's kind of know what nuclear fusion is. So nuclear fusion isn't just a current idea. In fact, it dates back to the 1940s, to be precise 1946. So what in the world is nuclear fusion? Well, you could imagine it with this narrative. Imagine the sun was replicated here on Earth. Well, changes from a gas to plasma, in which the negatively charged electrons are separated from the positively charged atomic nuclei. Normally, fusion is not possible because the strong repulsive electrostatic forces between the positively charged nuclei prevent them from getting close enough together to collide in order for fusion to occur. However, if the conditions are just right and the nuclei can overcome the electrostatic forces to the extent that they can come within a very close range of each other, then the attractive nuclear force between the nuclei will outweigh the repulsive force, allowing the nuclei to fuse together. Then such conditions can occur when the temperature increases, causing the ions to move faster and eventually reach speeds high enough to bring the ions close enough together. Then the nuclei can fuse, causing a release of energy. So what technology gives rise to fusion? Well, looking at the previous example, the sun has massive gravitational forces which create the right conditions for fusion to actually exist. But here on Earth, they are harder to achieve or to replicate. Well, if broken down, it all boils down to the fusion fuel and the engineering marvel involved in making this plasma. Well, that's why I call it an engineering marvel. So the fusion fuel are isotopes of hydrogen. They can be deuterium or tritium. Deuterium can be gotten from seawater, while tritium is produced naturally in the upper atmosphere when cosmic rays strike nitrogen molecules in the air. At least the first seems easy to get from seawater, while the second not so likely. But the isotopes in question, the deuterium and tritium, must be heated to extreme pressures of over 50 degrees Celsius or higher, and must be kept stable under intense pressure. Well, this would in turn make it dense enough and confined for long enough to allow the nuclei to The entire process brings about the ignition. The ignition is to achieve a self-sustaining fusion reaction with fresh fuel then being added to continue it. Since we're talking about fusion energy, the fusion in this place could be any abundant hydrogen occurring, being it natural gas or water and so on. Once ignition is achieved, nuclear fusion could generate about 4 times the amount of energy yield as that of nuclear fission. So if the nuclear fusion technology is so revolutionary in every sense, why hasn't it been adopted by virtually everyone and everything? Well, the difficulty lied in developing a device that can heat the fuel, mind you, deuterium and tritium fuel, to a high enough temperature and confine it so long that more energy is released through nuclear fusion reactions than in use to getting the reactions going. While the deuterium-tritium reaction is the main focus of attention for now, long-term hopes are for deuterium-deuterium reaction, but this requires much more higher temperatures. Well, hold on a second, all hope shouldn't be lost, because presently there are 2 main experimental approaches that are being studied. One of them is magnetic confinement, and the second is inertial confinement, but there are others, but we'll talk about them during the course of this video. In a nutshell, the first method uses strong magnetic fields to contain the hot plasma, while the second involves compressing a small pellet containing fusion fuel to extremely high densities using strong lasers or particle beams. The magnetic field confinement reactor type could be regarded as the state of the art for the industry because it involves the use of sufficiently strong current, and also the magnetic field are ideal for containing a plasma because electrical charges on the separated ions and electrons mean that they follow the magnetic field lines. This approach is widely used to prevent the particles from coming in contact with the reactor walls, as this will dissipate their heat and slow them down. The widely used and most effective magnetic confinement configuration is in fact shaped like a donut and is called a tokamak. With the help of an induced current from a transformer, this donut-like shaped object generates two magnetic fields, a polydal and a toroidal magnetic field, which creates a three-dimensional helix in which the plasma is highly confined. The tokamak technology shows so much importance that huge sums of money is invested in it yearly. For example, like the US Department of Energy has announced that they plan to provide up to $50 million to support US scientists conducting experimental research in fusion energy, and that alone feels like a win in my book. The tokamak approach has gotten the light of day from both public and private groups wishing to make fusion energy a reality, like the ITER project that involves the collaboration between the European Union, China, India, Japan, Korea, Russia, and the United States, planned for the construction of a large demo reactor in France, in which the cost will be shared by the collaborating countries. Well, the ITER project seems like a step in the right direction, where it will be heated to 150 million degrees centigrade and will generate 500 megawatts for 7 minutes. Although it may not come as a shocker, but its first test runs are scheduled for 2025 and its full deuterium to tritium fusion is not scheduled until 2035. That's like 13 years from now. Whoosh! Another publicly funded program is called the EAST, which is situated in China. This machine cost the government nearly $900 million to build and operate through 2019. Since then, the government has been investing large sums of money into its development, and only recently was it awarded a second sum of $900 million again for its funding. Previous year, the EAST device has achieved world records, maintaining a plasma temperature of 120 million degrees Celsius for 101 seconds and 160 million degrees Celsius for 20 seconds. It's so successful that ongoing claims narrate this thing to be 6 times hotter than the sun. This achievement should be seen as a huge success for a fusion device and show the scientific progress of China's research teams, and also considering the fact that not so much implementation progress has come from other fusion demonstrations. The EAST project is so power demanding that estimates from Business Insider claim that it guzzles 10 megawatts of power, and that's enough to power 1,640 American homes for a year. One other government-owned tokamak configuration that has proven effective in trying to demonstrate nuclear fusion is JET. JET achieved its first plasma on 25th of June 1983. On the 9th of November 1991, JET performed the world's first deuterium to tritium experiment. Results from ITER experiments I talked about earlier helped JET to further tailor its goals, proving especially helpful while revamping JET between 2009 and 2011. Now, both JET and ITER are working together to design experiments at JET that will help researchers at ITER make better decisions. JET succeeded in beating a previous energy record of 59 megajoules of energy for 5 seconds, breaking its previously held record from 1997. We haven't talked about and analyzed some public efforts in fusion energy. Some privately held companies aren't even a fusion problem to just government agencies alone. They also want to have a go at it, cause we all know competition is good for innovation. One of such companies, however, based in the UK, goes by the name General Fusion. It takes a somewhat varying approach called magnetized target fusion. You may be wondering, what does that even mean? Alright, let's look at it this way. It seeks a middle ground between the energy-intensive high magnetic fields needed to confine a tokamak plasma and the energy-intensive lasers used to rapidly compress plasma in inertial confinement designs. Yeah, I know we haven't yet mentioned inertial confinement, but I'll get to that in a moment. General Fusion's reactor uses a centrifuge to spin a chamber filled with molten lead and lithium. That motion opens a cavity in the liquid metal where the plasma sits. A piston system pumps more liquid metal into the chamber, compressing the plasma over a few tens of milliseconds. Then fusion begins. Alright, I agree. Tokamaks come with a whole lot of hype. But did you know that accelerators are also unique in their own way but don't get as much attention? These helical-shaped devices generate magnetic field lines by external field coils and not via an induced plasma current like that of magnetic tokamaks. This confinement scheme has some advantages of its own. For example, steady-state plasma is possible and it does not have to brace itself against disruption of plasma current. And just in case you didn't know, steady-state is when the system conditions such as pressure and confinement are sufficient enough to allow the generation of plasma at a stable rate. Well, despite the tokamak's current prevalence, it's still possible that accelerators could one day become the preferred option for a prospective fusion energy plant, while this reactor type seeks to create a continuous stable plasma in which fusion can take place. The alternative, inertial confinement, which I said I was going to come back in a moment's time, seeks to generate energy from a series of discrete fusion reactions producing a burst of energy each time. The idea behind this approach is a bit different from magnetic confinement in the sense that small capsules containing around 150 milligrams of a mixture of deuterium and tritium are exposed to a massive pulse of energy from multiple lasers. When the laser beam strikes the capsule, they create an explosion which generates a pressure pulse that hits and compresses the deuterium and tritium mixture with such vigor that the conditions for fusion are generated at its core. A company whose approach follows similar to the inertial confinement scheme is First Light Fusion, located in the University of Oxford. Here, the fusion plasma isn't held by magnetic fields, rather a shock wave compresses it to immense densities needed for fusion, and the plasma retains its shape just for a split second by inertia alone, before spreading and dissipating its energy. Well, a slight caveat with the First Light implementation is the use of electromagnetic projectile gun instead of lasers to fire a small piece of material into a target containing the hydrogen isotopes. Alright, one more approach to the fusion energy problem I'd like to talk about is currently being developed by a company in Everett, Washington called Helion Energy. It has attracted the most interest from investors like Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, and Dusky Moskovitz. Pardon if I didn't pronounce his name properly, one of the co-founders of Facebook. It announced a $500 million funding round early November last year. It aims to generate electricity directly from fusion rather than using the process of heating fluids and driving turbines, which the magnetic confinement types do. Helion Energy's technique involves firing pulses of plasma together inside the linear reactor, then rapidly compressing the merged plasma with magnetic fields. When fusion occurs, the plasma expands and its magnetic field interacts with the surrounding reactor to induce an electric current. Left for me, I feel this is one to look out for in the near future. Well, some notable mentions which didn't garner much attention but still hope to solve the fusion problem nonetheless are hybrid fusion and cold fusion. I'll just give you a little summary about them without going into details cause I feel this video is long enough already. The basic idea behind hybrid fusion is to use high energy fast neutrons from a fusion reactor to trigger fission in fuels like uranium-238 or thorium-232, both of which are radioactive in nature. Each neutron can trigger several fission events, multiplying the energy released by each fusion reaction hundreds of times, but there is no self-sustaining chain reaction from fission. While cold fusion saw the light of the day, when two researchers from the USA and UK claimed to have achieved fusion in a simple tabletop apparatus working at room temperature. Well, cold fusion involves the electrolysis of heavy water using palladium electrodes to give heat as well as other fusion byproducts including helium, tritium and neutrons. However, since other experimenters failed to replicate these, most of the scientific community no longer consider it as a real phenomenon at all. Fusion energy could prove to be the missing piece in the lifelong energy puzzle because its readily available fuels like deuterium are sourced from seawater and tritium sourced from the atmosphere. Also, as a good alternative, it could reduce the carbon footprint generated by other sources of energy. It would also be functional and effective despite weather conditions unlike the current renewables. And above all, it will satisfy our growing energy needs. Well, it's not all sunshine and roses like it's considered to be by some. For example, The fusion fuel of tritium is easily incorporated into water, making the water itself weakly radioactive. And some drawbacks associated with fusion energy are the cost of building the reactor and plants, and also the fact that it requires almost as much energy to create nuclear fusion as the energy it creates. Well, it goes without saying that a whole lot is banking on fusion breakthrough. If or when it is successful and does in fact achieve wide adoption, humanity would achieve great feats in every sphere of life like it's never seen before. Thanks for watching. I'm your host Golden. Click the like button if you enjoyed this video and don't forget to subscribe. Cheers.